for people who have not developed either a belief or they don't feel that they're actually communicating with an ancestor, but they would like to. Do you have any suggestions as to how to make a solid connection and then believe that that's who it really is?
So yeah, we are being communicated with all the time. The question is whether we're listening or whether we're believing it or whether we are, or whether we're just doubting it, dismissing it, and thinking it's our mind. So when you start to trust it, you will start to notice that they are communicating with you all the time. And what I would suggest to people to do is that to get into a quiet space and to just clear your mind. And you'll find things like when you're in the shower, you will hear messages. But when you hear those messages, before you dismiss them and doubt them, write them down. Just write them down. And you will be surprised how many times that they will actually pan out. And if it's giving you some kind of guidance, follow that guidance. Now, once you start to dismiss it, once you start to say, oh, that was my mind, what ends up happening is that you've dismissed it, but what ends up happening is that you start to feel a little bit of fear and you start to say, oh, what if this? And when it's fear, when the message is fear-based, it is definitely your mind. The messages from our ancestors and from our deceased loved ones are never fear-based. And really, I'm going to say this without exception, they're never fear-based. And if they are even trying to warn you of a fear situation, of something that you do have to be afraid of, they don't warn you in a fear-based way. They tell you how to get out of that situation. So the message never feels fearful. It never does. It's a message telling you either why you need to, it brings you comfort. Even in a fear-based situation, it's like, okay, it's sort of like if you're about to be hit by a truck, to be really drastic, the message will tell you, it'll tell you stop even at the green light. Even though the light is green, don't go through it, just stop. And you'll stop, and then you'll see someone run a red light, and you'll be like, oh my God, if I went through that light, I would have been hit. So the message is not, you're about to get hit. It's never a fear-based message. It's the way out of that fear. So not all messages are warning you of something, but what I'm trying to say is the messages from the other side are never fear-based. So if you are seeing a psychic or a clairvoyant or someone who's telling you they're channeling your ancestors, if they give you fear-based messages, dismiss them. Then it's not legitimate. It's not genuine. I've had people come to me. Every time people come to me, they're in fear, and I'm always trying to alleviate their fear. Because here's the thing. Any responsible psychic or clairvoyant knows that fear blocks you from getting the messages. The idea is always to alleviate the fear so that you can continue to get messages. So the biggest block to getting messages is fear, doubt, stress, anger, all these kinds of heavier emotions. So yeah, a psychic should never put you in fear. They should always alleviate the fear. And when your fear is alleviated, you don't even need a psychic, and you start to get the messages yourself. If you're out in nature, the energy is clearer, you're more likely to get messages. If you're away from your own environment, because when you're in your own environment, your mind is occupied. You've got your routine, you've got your patterns, so you may not get messages so easily. But when you're on vacation, somewhere completely new, you're more likely to get messages because your mind is kind of open and free and looking and receiving. So you're more likely to get messages. So there's, if you're in a city with a lot of other people, in crowds, you can still get messages, but less likely. If you're out in nature, in lower density areas, much easier to get messages.
Right. Okay. So then how about if somebody is in, like you were in stage 4 cancer, what if somebody's in the midst of a truly frightening illness, and they just live in a constant state of anxiety where they're you just can't feel anything but terror. What would you recommend for somebody like that?
So the first thing I would recommend to them is to, so what happens is when somebody is in that space of terror, they are in that space of terror because their mind is constantly focused on the illness or whatever is causing the anxiety. So I would shift their focus and I would say, I want you to know that the problem is not the illness, but the problem is your anxiety and your terror and your fear. That's actually the issue. What happens is that when we are in this space of anxiety, it's harder even for healing to reach us. So our ancestors, our loved ones are trying to heal us all the time. But when it's our time to go, they're trying to help us cross over. They are with us all the time. That's something I would really want you to know. They don't leave us. They're with us all the time. That's something I should have said earlier as well, that when I was on the other side, I discovered from my loved ones, my dad included, but all the others, they wanted me to know that they were with me all the time. Even when I didn't know they were there, they were with me. Even when I was really sick, they were with me. So I would want people to know that that their fear is what is preventing them from receiving insights. It's preventing their energy from expanding. The fear is also, that anxiety, that fear, that stress is also what is weighing down on their immune system. And if they could free up their immune system, healing can take place. So when I work with people, I always find that I get them when they're in this state of fear. And I always think that it's so interesting because even doctors put people into this state of fear by giving them a bad diagnosis. But fear depletes your immune system. And when you are in a state of illness, you need your immune system. So it's a little ironic that that when people are ill, everything about our current paradigm puts them into fear. That is the time when your ancestors want to communicate with you. They want to help you. So your job is not to figure out how to heal. Your job is to alleviate the fear. That's what I would tell people. So stop focusing on the illness. Now let's look at the fear. But you don't want to focus on the fear because, when you focus on something, you're actually, then that's all you're thinking about. So in order to alleviate fear, you have to introduce something else. And the something else is love. It's joy, it's passion. So what I tend to do is, if someone is dealing with a debilitating illness, I say to them, if you had a clean bill of health tomorrow, if you just got this clean bill of health, what would you do with your life? What would you do? How would you live it? How would you celebrate? And now what would you do with the rest of your life? And I get them to imagine that and think about that and get excited about that. In that state of excitement, their ancestors can get through to them. Their ancestors can actually penetrate that energy and start communicating with them.
Okay. Now, one thing came to mind as you were speaking, that was beautiful. But what I'm thinking is, okay, let's just say that I've got a really scary illness and I'm feeling like my ancestors want to help me. But I also know that my ancestors show up right before I'm going to die to help lead me across. How can we accept the help of ancestors when we're not at the brink of crossing over?
So when your ancestors show up, whether it's just to help you get through an illness or whether it's because you're going to die, all that fear is gone. It's just gone. And so what I'm trying to say is that when you're going to die, you'll know it. You'll know it by the way they come to you. When you're going to die, you will actually be able to see them. It's like something opens up and you'll actually be able to see them. But when you're not dying, they are planting thoughts in your mind. Like when you're sitting under a tree, you're sitting on the grass, or you're sitting on the beach watching the ocean. when you're in the shower. They're planting thoughts in your mind. So it's not, it's a completely different feeling. But don't be afraid of your ancestors at all, because as soon as you let them in, it just feels really beautiful. It feels super comforting. You feel super safe, and you become open to anything, like literally anything, when you let them in.
Okay, well, thank you for answering that question. Before we go any further, I want to make sure that I mention your website, and perhaps you can let people know what they'll find there. The website is, simply enough, anitamoorjani.com, and I know you have a lot of resources there.
Yes, I've got my story is there. There's a lot of podcasts. There's also a link on my website to my YouTube channel, or people can go directly to my YouTube channel, where I have a ton of videos that I've shared about my experience on the other side, what I experienced on the other side, about the healing, and even about how to communicate with our deceased loved ones, and also just generally about life. So I have a ton of videos, and I would love for people to follow me on my YouTube or my Facebook or my Instagram. So thank you.
Okay, wow. Once again, thank you so much, Anita, for sharing your time and your expertise. And before we go, I want to make sure, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we talk about today? This is such a huge topic, and I want to make sure we get in as much as we can.
Thank you. Well, I hope I've managed to answer some of your questions, because I'm aware that my focus hasn't always been on ancestors, but yet when you mentioned that, yes, I did experience being with them, and that is so true, 100%. But the one thing that I just wanted to mention is that I wanted to reiterate again that our ancestors are trying to communicate with us all the time, but also my sense is that they don't want us to take life as seriously as we do. And that is one of our biggest problems right now in this world right now. Most of us seem to be living like we're living in a pressure cooker, where our lives are stressed out. We take life too seriously. We don't laugh enough. And interestingly, if you just lighten up, life will change. We think that we are stressed because of outside circumstances, but actually the more stressed and the more seriously we take life, and the more stressed out we are about life, the more we're actually contributing to a life of stress. But if you consciously lighten up, and you consciously choose to laugh more and take life less seriously, and eat in a lighter way, and not be so fearful about food and pesticides and all these things, and not be so fearful about everything, the more we lighten up, the more that we will actually be allowing our ancestors to come in and help us and lift us out of this situation. This is a bit of a paradox, and I don't know how to I want to do justice in how I explain this. Our ancestors want to come in and help us. But when we go around saying things like, oh my God, the planet, look what's happening to the planet, look what's happening. And we make people feel that if you don't jump on it, then you're irresponsible. If you don't do something, then you're part of the problem. And people are starting to feel fear. They feel fear of the condition of the planet. The more fear and stress we feel, the more we're actually contributing to that energy, which actually prevents us from getting the help that we need from the other side. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
It absolutely does. And in fact, I've thought about this many times, that this whole concept of ancestral healing, even though it's been around for a while, it's becoming much more mainstream, and a lot more people are beginning to realize that there is information, there are ancestors coming through. And I think it's really interesting that the timing of us all sort of waking up to this topic goes along with the timing of what you were talking about. So it's almost like the collective ancestors are trying to reach through and tell us, lighten up.
Lighten up, lighten up. And as we lighten up, we will start to be more conscious and aware of the planet and the needs of the planet and the needs of the people who are hungry. You know, like right now, our governments and our politicians and all are so paranoid, they spend our tax dollars on weapons to kill people instead of feeding each other. We're killing each other instead of feeding each other. It's because we've become such a stressed out, angry race of people. Our ancestors want us to lighten up. They don't want us to be so fearful. They don't even want us to be so fearful about the condition of the planet. The more we lighten up, the more of that energy we're spreading and spreading to other people. We all need to lighten up. We need to laugh more. We need to love more. We need to care more. We need to empathize more. We need to lighten up. That would be my final message. So when you take yourself out into the world, take a lighter self into the world, not somebody who's out there, trying to change the world in anger and fear and stress.
All right, beautiful. I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you again, Anita Moorjani.